What is this, Claire? Are you introducing your boyfriend at our anniversary? The laughter came first, sharp and careless, echoing across the garden before the music even had time to fade. And for a moment I wasn't sure if I had heard him correctly or if my mind was trying to protect me from the humiliation unfolding in front of 50 people under warm golden lights strung across our backyard. But then I saw the way Ethan was looking at me, that familiar half-smile, the one he used when he wanted a joke to land just a little deeper than it should. And suddenly every conversation around us slowed, every glass paused midair, and every pair of eyes turned toward me as if I had just confirmed something they had all been quietly suspecting. And I felt it immediately, that subtle shift in the room, the kind that doesn't need words to announce itself, where curiosity mixes with judgment and hangs thick in the air, pressing against your chest until breathing feels deliberate, controlled, unnatural. And I stood there in the dress I had spent 2 hours choosing, the one I thought would make tonight feel special again, feeling anything but special as the silence stretched just long enough to become uncomfortable, long enough for Vanessa to lean closer to someone beside her with a whisper and a smirk she didn't bother to hide, long enough for my mother-in-law to tilt her head slightly as if she were reevaluating everything she thought she knew about me, and long enough for me to realize that Ethan wasn't taking it back, he wasn't laughing it off, he wasn't even looking away, he was waiting for me to respond, to defend myself, to play along. And that was when I noticed him, the man standing just a few feet behind me, unfamiliar yet strangely composed, dressed in a dark suit that didn't quite match the casual elegance of the evening, his posture straight, his expression unreadable, and unlike everyone else, he wasn't looking at me with curiosity or amusement. He was looking at Ethan, steady, focused, like he had come here for a reason that had nothing to do with jokes, and everything inside me went still because somehow, in that single moment, I knew this night was no longer about an anniversary, and whatever was about to happen next was going to change everything. No one laughed a second time, not really, because even the people who had smiled at Ethan's joke seemed to sense something was off, something that did not belong in a room filled with soft jazz, polished glassware, and carefully curated happiness. And I could feel it spreading, that quiet discomfort moving from table to table like a ripple no one wanted to acknowledge, and yet no one could ignore, and I kept my smile in place, the same polite, controlled smile I had learned to wear over the past few months whenever Ethan decided to turn me into the center of his humor. But tonight it felt heavier, harder to hold, like it might crack if I let myself breathe too deeply, and I became aware of everything at once, the faint clink of ice shifting inside someone's drink, the low hum of a conversation that never fully resumed, the way a couple near the edge of the patio leaned slightly closer together as if sharing a quiet judgment, and I hated that I could read it so clearly, that unspoken question hanging in the air, is it true? Is there something we do not know? And I realized then that this was not just a joke to Ethan, it was a performance, one where I was expected to play along or risk making things worse, and for a second I considered laughing it off, brushing it aside, pretending none of this mattered. But something inside me resisted, something small but steady that refused to shrink any further. And as I stood there, I felt the weight of the man behind me again, not moving, not interrupting, just present in a way that made everything sharper, clearer. And when I finally turned my head slightly, just enough to see him from the corner of my eye, I noticed the details I had missed before, the way his hands were clasped calmly in front of him, the way his gaze never wavered from Ethan, not once, not even when all attention had shifted toward me, and it struck me then that he was not confused, he was not embarrassed, he was waiting for the exact right moment to speak, and somehow that realization unsettled me more than the joke itself, because whatever he was about to say did not feel accidental, it felt intentional, like something that had been carried here, into this night, into this moment, with a purpose I did not yet understand. It had not always been like this, and that was the part that made it harder to stand there pretending everything was normal, because just a few months ago Ethan would have been the first to notice if I felt uncomfortable in a room, the first to shift the conversation, to protect me without making it obvious, and I used to believe that kind of attention meant something solid, something lasting, but somewhere along the way it changed, slowly at first, so gradually I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Small comments during dinners with friends, jokes that carried a sharper edge than they needed to, a tone that turned playful moments into something slightly humiliating, and every time I told myself it was stress, that his work had been demanding, that people said things they did not mean when they were under pressure, and I kept adjusting, softening my reactions, choosing silence over confrontation because I thought that was what kept a marriage steady. But standing there now, with dozens of eyes quietly measuring me. I could no longer pretend this was harmless, because this was not a private moment between two people who understood each other. This was public, deliberate, and designed to put me in a position where I either laughed along or risked confirming the very suspicion he had planted. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that this was not the first time he had done this in front of others, just the most obvious, the most undeniable, and something inside me tightened as I remembered a dinner 3 weeks ago when he had joked about me not being able to keep up with his business conversations, the way a few people had laughed politely while I smiled and changed the subject, or the night at a friend's house when he had implied I was overly sensitive, brushing it off before I could respond, and I realized now that those moments had been building toward something, shaping how people saw me, setting a quiet narrative that made tonight's comment feel almost believable, and that realization settled heavily in my chest because it meant this was not just a careless remark, it was a pattern, and patterns do not appear by accident, and as I stood there between the man I married and the stranger who had not yet spoken, I felt something shift inside me, not loud, not dramatic, but steady and certain, like a line I had not known existed finally being drawn. The silence stretched just a second too long, the kind that does not belong at a celebration, and I could feel it pressing against my chest as I slowly turned to face Ethan fully, forcing my shoulders to stay relaxed even though every instinct inside me wanted to step back, to disappear into the background where no one was watching, but I did not move, not this time, because something about the way he was looking at me made it clear that stepping back would only confirm what he had already suggested, and I refused to give him that, so I held his gaze steady, even as my pulse thudded in my ears, and for a brief moment I thought he might break, might laugh it off, might say something to undo the tension he had created, but he did not. Instead he lifted his glass slightly, as if doubling down on the moment, as if the attention of the entire room was exactly where he wanted it. And that was when I understood that this was not accidental, this was intentional, calculated in a way I had not allowed myself to see before, and I felt a strange calm settle over me, not the kind that comes from comfort, but the kind that comes when something finally makes sense, even if that truth is uncomfortable, and I realized I had a choice, to play along and shrink like I always had, or to stand still and let whatever was about to unfold reveal itself without interference, and as I made that decision, I became aware again of the man behind me, still silent, still watching, and there was something different now, something more certain in the way he shifted his weight slightly forward, like he had reached the point where waiting was no longer necessary, and without raising his voice or drawing attention with any dramatic gesture, he finally took a step closer, just enough to move from the edge of the moment into the center of it, and I heard it then, the subtle intake of breath from someone nearby, the quiet recognition that something was about to change, and before Ethan could say another word, before anyone could laugh or redirect the conversation, the stranger's voice entered the space, calm, controlled, and completely at odds with the tension that had been building, and the instant he spoke, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next was not going to follow the script Ethan had imagined. The moment his voice entered the air, everything shifted in a way that no one could ignore, not even Ethan, who lowered his glass just slightly, his expression tightening in a way I had never seen before, as if something small but important had slipped out of his control, and the stranger did not rush, did not raise his voice, did not try to command attention, yet somehow he had all of it, because the room had already given it to him, willingly, curiously, cautiously, and I felt my own breath slow as I turned fully toward him now, no longer avoiding his presence, because whatever he had come here for was no longer something I could stand beside and pretend was not happening, and he met my eyes for the first time, not with familiarity, not with recognition, but with something steadier, something that felt almost like certainty, and then he spoke again, calm and precise, saying my full name in a way that made a quiet ripple pass through the crowd, because it was not casual, it was deliberate, like he had rehearsed it, like he needed to make sure there was no mistake about who he was addressing, and I felt a strange tension tighten in my chest as I searched my memory for any trace of him, any connection. But there was nothing, no face, no voice, nothing that explained why he was here or why he was looking at me like I mattered in this moment more than anyone else in the room, and I could sense Ethan shifting beside me now, subtle but unmistakable, the kind of movement that comes when someone is no longer comfortable but does not want to show it, and he let out a small, controlled laugh trying to recover the tone he had set earlier, asking if this was some kind of joke. But the question landed differently this time, flat, uncertain, because no one else was laughing anymore, No one was willing to follow him into that space again, and the stranger did not respond to Ethan right away, which somehow made everything heavier, more intentional, like he was choosing exactly when and how to speak next, and when he finally did. His words were simple, almost too simple for the weight they carried, as he said he was not here for a joke, and he was definitely not here for a misunderstanding, and that the reason he had come tonight had nothing to do with me bringing anyone into this house, and everything to do with something that should have been told a long time ago. And as those words settled into the silence, I felt it, that unmistakable shift in the room again, deeper this time, sharper, because whatever was about to be revealed was no longer just about embarrassment or suspicion, it was about truth, and truth does not arrive quietly without changing something. For a moment no one spoke, and I could feel the weight of his words settling into every corner of the space, pressing against the quiet conversations that had completely disappeared now, and I realized that whatever he was about to reveal, he was choosing his timing carefully, not just for me, but for everyone watching, and that thought alone made my chest tighten, because this was no longer something private that could be contained or dismissed later. This was unfolding in front of people who would remember every detail, every reaction, every word, and I became aware of Ethan again, the subtle shift in his posture now more obvious, his shoulders no longer relaxed, his expression caught somewhere between forced composure and something much less controlled, and he spoke again, quicker this time, as if trying to regain control before it slipped any further, asking what exactly the stranger meant and why he would come here uninvited to say something so vague. But his voice did not carry the same confidence it had earlier, and that difference did not go unnoticed, not by me, not by the guests, and certainly not by the man standing in front of us, who remained calm, almost unaffected by the tension he had just created. And then he did something small but unmistakable, reaching into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulling out a thin envelope, nothing dramatic, nothing oversized, just a simple sealed piece of paper that somehow drew more attention than anything else that had happened tonight, and I felt my breath catch without understanding why, as he held it for a moment, not opening it yet, not handing it over, just letting its presence speak for itself, and then his eyes shifted, not to me this time, but directly to Ethan, steady and unflinching, as if the next part of this had always been meant for him, and when he finally spoke again, his tone remained even, controlled, but there was something underneath it now, something firm that left no room for interruption, as he said that this should have been given to me months ago, that it was never meant to reach me this way, and that the only reason he was standing here tonight was because someone had made sure it never did. And as those words settled in, I felt it, that quiet but undeniable realization beginning to form, not fully clear yet, but impossible to ignore, because whatever was inside that envelope was not just information, it was something that had been kept from me, and somehow, without needing to open it, I already knew that the person standing closest to me was the one who had kept it hidden. The air felt heavier than before, like the entire night had narrowed down to that single envelope in his hand, and I could feel every eye moving between it and Ethan, waiting, measuring, trying to understand what had just shifted beneath the surface of what was supposed to be a celebration. And for the first time since the evening began, I saw something real in Ethan's expression, not confidence, not amusement, but a flicker of something he could not fully hide, something that looked dangerously close to concern, and he stepped forward slightly, just enough to close the distance between himself and the stranger, his voice lower now, more controlled, asking what exactly this was supposed to mean and suggesting that whatever it was could be discussed another time, privately, away from the attention of everyone else. But that suggestion landed differently than he intended, because it was the first time he had tried to move something out of the public space he had created himself, and that contradiction did not go unnoticed, not by me, not by the people watching, and definitely not by the man holding the envelope, who did not step back, did not lower his gaze, and instead spoke with the same calm certainty, saying that privacy had already been given, that time had already been allowed, and that neither had been used the way they should have been. And then, without hesitation, he extended the envelope toward me, not Ethan, not anyone else, but directly to me, and that simple choice carried more weight than anything else he had said, because it made it clear who this had always been meant for. And my hands felt colder than I expected as I reached out, aware of every movement, every breath, every second, stretching longer than it should, and when my fingers finally touched the paper, I felt it, that unmistakable shift inside me again, sharper now, more defined, because this was no longer about what people thought or what Ethan had implied. This was about something real, something tangible, something that had been kept from me, and as I pulled the envelope fully into my hands, I did not look at the stranger. I did not look at the guests, I looked at Ethan, and in that brief, silent moment I saw it clearly, the exact second he realized that whatever was inside that envelope was no longer something he could control. I could feel the texture of the envelope between my fingers, slightly rough at the edges, sealed in a way that made it clear it had not been opened since the moment it was meant to reach me, and for a second I did nothing, just stood there holding it while the entire room seemed to lean in without moving, waiting for something that none of them could name but all of them could feel, and I became aware of how quiet it had gotten. No music, no laughter, not even the faint hum of conversation. Just the soft rustle of fabric as someone shifted their weight and the distant sound of a glass being set down somewhere behind me, and I realized that whatever happened next would not be forgotten, not by me and not by anyone watching, and slowly, deliberately, I slid my finger beneath the seal and opened it, careful not to rush, not to let my hand show the tension I could feel building inside my chest, and as the paper inside unfolded, I saw it immediately, not a long explanation, not pages of information, just a single document, clean, official, unmistakable, and my eyes moved across the lines faster than I expected, picking up names, dates, signatures, details that connected too quickly to ignore, and with each second something inside me shifted, not breaking, not collapsing, but aligning like pieces of a puzzle I had not realized were missing suddenly falling into place. And I did not look up right away. I kept reading, letting every word settle, letting every implication take shape, because I needed to be certain, needed to understand before I allowed anyone else to see what I was seeing. And when I finally lifted my gaze, it was not confusion they saw on my face, it was clarity, sharp and steady, and I turned my head slowly toward Ethan, holding the paper in my hand without shaking, without hesitation, and in that moment I did not need to say anything for the room to feel it, because the shift had already happened, the balance had already changed, and whatever story had been building around me just minutes ago was no longer mine to defend, it was his to explain. The room felt like it had frozen in time, every second dragging longer than the last, and I could see the way Ethan's expression shifted, that mask of control he had worn earlier now completely gone, replaced by something I had only seen in fleeting moments before, something close to fear, and in that moment, I realized that everything I had been feeling, all the confusion, all the small doubts, had led me here to this moment, where the truth was not just about the paper in my hand, but about what was happening between us. And as I looked at Ethan, I did not feel anger, not yet, but I did feel something else, something stronger, something that had been building quietly beneath the surface, and I heard my own voice before I fully understood what I was about to say, asking him simply, why? The word hung between us, simple but impossible to ignore, and I watched as Ethan swallowed hard, his lips pressing together, eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape that wasn't there, and for a moment, the weight of what I had just asked seemed to crush him, and he did not answer right away, not in the way I had hoped, not in any way that made sense. Instead, he stepped back, his gaze shifting away from me, his hand running through his hair like he was trying to gather his thoughts, and I saw then that this was not about an explanation anymore. It was about him trying to hold on to something he had lost the moment that envelope had been opened, the moment the truth had started to slip out, and I realized that whatever explanation he had been planning was no longer going to save him, because the truth was already here, in the air between us, hanging heavy, undeniable, and as I stood there holding the document in my hand, I understood something else, something even more unsettling, that he had known all along, that this moment was coming, and he had chosen to let it happen anyway.